we're going to get into a story that honestly feels like a political thriller and a family tragedy all rolled into one. It's really a cautionary tale about how one single bad decision can have these devastating ripple effects that nobody sees coming. And it all comes down to this one central puzzle. How in the world does a nation's greatest hero end up being the one who sets the stage for its biggest downfall? Let's dig in.
All right, so our story kicks off with a man named Gideon. He's a celebrated war hero, a guy who seemed to do everything right, until he made one single fatal mistake.
I want you to picture this. Gideon has just led this tiny underdog army to an absolutely impossible victory over the Midianites. The whole nation is ecstatic, right? They look at this guy, their liberator, and they say, "You have to be our king. You and your sons after you." This is his peak moment of triumph. And Gideon, he gives the perfect answer. He turns down the crown, declaring that God alone is their true ruler. On the surface, it looks like this incredible act of humility and faith. He's pointing everyone back to where their focus should be. But right after this incredibly noble speech, he makes a very, very different kind of request. He asks for all the gold earrings from the spoils of war to create something called an ephod. Now, what is an ephod? Well, it's supposed to be a sacred piece of clothing worn by the high priest. But the one Gideon made, yeah, that was something else entirely. It was a solid gold object that completely blurred the line between a religious memorial and a flat-out idol. And listen, we're not talking about some small trinket here. The weight of the gold he collected was 1,700 shekels. To put that in perspective, that's over 40 pounds of pure gold. He takes this incredible treasure and basically builds a monument in his own hometown. And this is really the heart of the whole problem. The very thing he created to remember God's victory becomes a spiritual trap, a snare. The people start to worship it, and this one act of, misplaced piety, it sets a trap that wouldn't actually spring until after he died. But when it did, it was going to catch his entire family in its jaws.
Now, what's so fascinating about this is the massive contradiction it shows us. Publicly, you've got Gideon the hero who says, "I will not be king." But privately, Gideon the father acts a whole lot like a king. He takes many wives, he has 70 sons, and this is the real kicker, he names one of his sons Abimelech, which literally means, "My father is king." So he publicly rejects the title, but privately he's living the lifestyle, leaving behind this huge power vacuum and a family that was just primed for chaos.
So, Gideon dies, and that snare he set all those years ago, well, it's about to snap shut. The power vacuum he created is about to be filled by his most ambitious and his most ruthless son. And who steps into the void? Abimelech, the son literally named, "My father is king." He doesn't waste a second. He immediately makes his move. He doesn't go to the elders of Israel or anything. No, he goes straight to his mother's side of the family in the powerful city of Shechem, and he makes a very cunning political pitch.
And here is his brutal four-step plan to seize power. First, he goes to his relatives and says, "Look, is it better for you to be ruled by 70 guys or just one? Hey, remember, I'm your own flesh and blood." It works. They agree and give him money from their temple. Money that was dedicated to a false god, by the way. He uses that cash to hire a gang of mercenaries, just a bunch of reckless men. And then, with them, he hunts down and murders all 69 of his brothers on a single stone to make sure there are no rivals to his throne.
All of them, except for one. The youngest son, a guy named Jotham, he manages to hide and escape the massacre. He's the only witness left to his brother's horrifying crime. So Jotham, from a safe distance, shouts down this incredible parable to the people of Shechem, who just crowned his murderous brother king. He tells them a story about how the valuable fruit-bearing trees, the olive, the fig, the vine, they all refused to become king because, they had a higher purpose. They were busy producing good things. So who is the only one to accept the crown? The worthless, useless thorn bush, or bramble, a plant that offers nothing of value, only the constant threat of catching fire and destroying everything around it. Abimelech, he says, is that thorn bush. Jotham then finishes with his absolutely chilling curse, and it's really more of a prophecy that the very people who propped up this worthless bramble king will be consumed by him, and that he, in turn, will be consumed by them. He's prophesying their mutual destruction.
And believe me, this was not just some angry rant. Jotham's curse becomes the exact blueprint for Abimelech's entire fiery and very short reign.
His rule, which was built entirely on blood, was never going to last. For 3 years, things seem kinda stable, but then the alliance just starts to crumble. The source text says an evil spirit descent between Abimelech and his supporters in Shechem, and just like that, the very people who bankrolled his coup, they now openly betray him. Abimelech's response is swift, and it is terrifyingly brutal. He attacks Shechem, he captures it, and he massacres the people. He then tears the entire city down and sows the ground with salt, a symbolic act meant to curse the land so nothing would ever grow there again. The fire from that thorn bush had really started to spread.
About 1,000 men and women had fled to a temple for safety. So what did Abimelech and his men do? They just piled branches and wood around it and set it on fire, burning every single person inside alive. He completely annihilated the city that had made him king.
But his reign of terror ends just as quickly as it began. While he's attacking another city, trying to burn another tower full of people, an anonymous woman up on the tower wall drops a heavy millstone, a common tool for grinding grain, and it lands directly on his head, crushing his skull. This great tyrant who murdered 69 of his own brothers wasn't killed by a mighty warrior, but by an ordinary woman with a household tool. And this brings us right back to where it all started. Back to Gideon, back to his family, and back to the snare that he set so many years before.
Jotham's curse was fulfilled perfectly. Fire came from Abimelech and it devoured the people of Shechem. And then fire, in the form of rebellion and a millstone, came from the people and it devoured Abimelech.
When you trace it all back, you can see this devastating chain reaction, this cascade of consequences. Gideon's one act of creating that idol led his family away from God. This spiritual decay created a toxic family culture, a mix of fake piety and raw ambition that produced a monster like Abimelech. And Abimelech's quest for power resulted in mass murder, civil war, and ultimately his own pathetic end. It all started with that golden ephod.
And it really leaves us with this final, crucial thought. The story of Gideon and Abimelech shows that the mistakes of a leader, even a great one, are rarely paid for by the leader alone. The consequences echo down through generations, paid for in the blood of their children and their nation.